Hi guys, my name is Fabiola Gretzinger and I'm a current 1L at the University of Minnesota Law School. I'm going to talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion at the school as well as current programs and attempts to kind of um, increase a little bit the welcoming of the community at the University of Minnesota Law School. So, a little background about myself. I grew up in San Jose, Costa Rica. I was born in the United States, but I moved there when I was 3. So I lived there for about 15 years. I also lived 2 years in Lima, Peru, and my mom is from Guatemala. So moving to the U.S. Was definitely a big change for me. I had not become aware about like what minorities were or how I identified as a Latina student. So moving specifically to Minnesota was definitely really hard. I moved when I was 18 for my undergraduate degree, so I think I was like initially exposed to being a minority when I was in undergrad. So the attempts I saw in undergrad were a lot different to what I saw now in Minnesota, and obviously the school has come a long way in the last like 4 years. So what I've seen most recently at the law school, I think I've overall had a really good experience as a 1L. Obviously in my like the incoming class for about 250, and we split up into sections. So in my section were 47 students, and I kind of see those same students for the rest of the year. So I have all my classes with them. In my section, I think we were about 5 or 6 people of color or any other minorities, not including women, of course, because that would be, I mean, half of my class, I think, if not more, is women or identify as women. So I've never really felt out of place. I've always felt welcome. Um, I One of the really cool things that I liked about when I started, especially my first semester, was some of my professors asked us to online kind of record how we say our name or type out how to say our name, so that when they were going down the list to cold call, they wouldn't have to hesitate, which was something that I encountered a lot of times. Just because they're going down the list and they see your name and they don't know how to say it, and they stand there for 5 minutes without knowing, and so you're coming up. But that definitely made me feel really welcomed. Also, most of my classmates never really even like recognized or like pointed out that like I was, like I didn't grow up here or anything. It was just kind of something like a fun fact about myself. I never felt really left out because of it. And I, honestly, like I actually had a really cool experience with one of my classmates. He came up to me and just started speaking to me in Spanish, which was totally like unexpected because I knew he grew up in Minnesota, so I was kind of like, oh, that was surprising, and he didn't have um, a Hispanic name or anything, and he just kind of literally told me in Spanish like, hey, like I studied abroad and I really love to practice my Spanish, and it can be it can be really nice to talk to someone who speaks the same language. So like, let me know if you ever want to like get coffee or something. And all of this he did in Spanish, like while we were standing at our lockers, and I thought that was super cool. And it definitely goes to speak to like the environment of the university being super welcoming. Um, I also have seen a lot. I'm also part of the diversity and belonging committee, so I've seen a lot of the attempts that the school has, specifically with like undergrad and some local high schools, to pipeline, which is something that I think is really important because it's kind of hard, when you don't, not knowing what to expect, when you don't see someone that looks like you. So I always say, like, like all of the people that I've seen that are Hispanic or Latino are all in immigration or criminal. And so for me, when I started, I thought like I had to go into immigration or criminal, and then throughout the law school, I talked to various Hispanic Latino students, not students, alumni who were going into different career paths. So like IP, um, that's the first thing that comes to mind because that was the person I actually spoke to. She was doing IP, so it was really interesting because it was kind of this pipeline program of like once you get out there, there's other opportunities for you that aren't based on like your ethnicity or your gender. So that was definitely a big thing. And then I myself has participated through the University of Minnesota with a pipeline program to undergraduate students. So I've done a couple panels where I go talk to students who are thinking about doing law school and kind of saying like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm interested in, this is the support I've gotten from the school. So I think I try to be as candid as possible when people ask me about this. Obviously, you're coming to a very white state. That's going to be reflected in the majority of the population of the students that you're with. Now, how tolerant those students are and how how much they want to learn about your culture and, you know, how welcoming they want to be is up to them. And I have had a great experience where they've been super receptive. And like I said, I've never really had a negative experience, at least not in my last 8 months at the law school or, you know, in the last 5 years that I've been in Minnesota. So I think it goes to speak to the general environment of the law school being super welcoming. Um, Another thing that I always plug is how amazing the student affinity groups are. We have quite a lot, and it seems to be that like it's not only, you know, like people of color, and then I'm thinking of specifically like some people, you know, they feel, specifically like white people, feel a little bit uncomfortable going into affinity groups because they think like they're taking up our space, which can be the case. So they've started other sorts of groups to help, you know, minorities. So there's like Voices for Immigration, there's the Asylum Law Project. All of these are like things that will help, you know, like I guess like the other like non-minority group of people kind of help us out and kind of like make us feel heard and, you know, just like help in any way that they can without also stepping on our toes. So, and I participated in an Asylum Law Project, and what I realized was like a lot of people are just trying to understand, without me having to be the person explaining it to them. Is more them like being curious and trying to understand like themselves, kind of like what it was like, you know, being a minority in law school. So overall, of course, there's a lack, you know, like being a person of color, you're a minority, that's kind of like, you're in Minnesota, it's a white state, so you do see a lot of, you know, disproportionality there. But I do think, at least in my last, you know, couple of months at the law school, I felt like, one, they're really interested in hearing what I have to say about it. I was invited into the diversity and belonging committee, and as well as student affinity group. So they kind of, you know, they're looking out to see how they can improve, which is probably the biggest step, you know, that they can do to start. And they're just kind of implementing, you know, how they can get more students. And it's a process, but I think they're getting there and they're doing their best to try it.